Have you ever wondered which prison is the world's worst? Prisons. They're places of punishment and penitence, of remorse and rehabilitation. They're the walls that society has built to separate those who've strayed from the path of law and order. But not all prisons are created equal. The world over, the design and execution of these institutions vary as widely as the societies they serve. Let's start by considering the purpose of prisons. In essence, they serve two key roles. First, they're intended to protect society by removing those who pose a threat. Second, they aim to rehabilitate these individuals, to reform them into law-abiding citizens who can reintegrate into society. Now, imagine a spectrum of prisons. On one end, you have what could be termed resort prisons. These are minimum security institutions, often found in countries like Norway, where the focus is strongly on rehabilitation. In these places, prisoners live in comfortable conditions, often with access to education and work opportunities. It's a far cry from the stereotypical image of a prison, but it's an approach that has seen success in reducing reoffending rates. Then we swing to the other end of the spectrum. Here we find the maximum security hellholes. These are the institutions that might spring to mind when you think of the word prison. They're places of harsh discipline and even harsher living conditions, where the focus is more on punishment than rehabilitation. In these prisons, survival can be as much a part of the sentence as the time served. The disparity between these two ends of the spectrum is striking. It raises questions about the nature of justice and the balance between punishment and rehabilitation. It challenges us to consider what the objective of a prison should be and how best to achieve that. But for now, it's time to leave the theoretical behind. Now, let's delve into the darkest corners of the world's harshest prisons. We'll take a journey into the unseen horrors that lie within these walls and examine what makes these prisons the most feared institutions on the planet. Imagine living in a place where human rights are a forgotten concept. Let's dive deep into the world's most brutal prisons, places where survival is a daily struggle, where dignity is a luxury, and where death is an everyday occurrence. Take North Korea's Camp 22 for instance. It's a prison that exists in the shadows, its existence denied by the North Korean government. Yet its horrors are all too real. This prison camp is said to house up to 50,000 prisoners, and its brutality is beyond imagination. It's a place where torture is routine, starvation is constant, and a spark of hope is extinguished before it can even ignite. In this grim place, prisoners are subjected to forced labor, sometimes for 20 hours a day, in the harshest conditions. Death lurks at every corner, and it's estimated that thousands have lost their lives here. Then there's Brazil's Carandiru Penitentiary. Known as one of the deadliest prisons in the world, its name is synonymous with violence and chaos. The living conditions are appalling, with overcrowding, poor sanitation, and rampant disease. It's a prison where the rule of law is overshadowed by the rule of the strongest, and where violence is the only language understood. The Carandiru Massacre of 1992, where a riot led to the death of 111 prisoners, stands as a testament to the horrifying conditions within its walls. These prisons are not anomalies but a cruel reality that exists in many parts of the world. They highlight the shocking neglect of basic human rights, the deplorable living conditions and the high death rates that are often swept under the rug. They serve as a stark reminder of the dark corners of our world where humanity seems to have lost its way. These places represent the extreme end of the spectrum, but what about the other end? As we continue this journey, we'll explore the stark contrast between these harshest of prisons and those on the other end of the spectrum. Not all prisons are designed to be a living nightmare. In stark contrast to the harrowing conditions we've explored so far, there are some facilities that bear an uncanny resemblance to a holiday resort rather than a place of punishment. Take Norway's Bastøy Island prison, for instance. Unlike many of the world's harshest prisons, Bastøy Island focuses on rehabilitation rather than retribution. Nestled in the tranquil waters of the Oslo Fjord, this low-security prison is home to about 100 inmates who enjoy an unusual level of freedom. They live in shared cottages, work on the prison farm, and even have access to leisure activities like fishing, tennis, and horseback riding. But don't be fooled. This is not a vacation, but a carefully crafted approach to justice. The Norwegian penal system firmly believes that treating prisoners with respect and dignity can help them reintegrate into society more effectively. And the results seem to speak for themselves. Norway boasts one of the lowest reoffending rates in the world. Yet Bastøy Island isn't the only example of this unconventional approach. There's also San Pedro Prison in Bolivia, where inmates live with their families, run businesses, and elect their own leaders. Then there's the open prison in Finland, where inmates work in the community during the day and return to the prison at night. These establishments starkly contrast the grim realities of the world's harshest prisons we discussed earlier. It's almost as if they belong to two different worlds, one where punishment is the primary aim and the other where the focus is on rehabilitation and reintegration. However, it's important to remember that these lenient prisons are not without their controversies. Critics argue that they are too soft on criminals and question their effectiveness in deterring crime. Others raise concerns about the fairness of such systems, where the severity of punishment can vary so drastically from one country to another. While these prisons might seem like a holiday in comparison, they are not without their controversies. Time can stretch endlessly in prison, but for some, it's over in a blink. Imagine, if you will, the case of Paul Geidel. His name might not ring a bell, but his story is one for the books. Sentenced in 1918 at the tender age of 17, Geidel would go on to serve an unimaginable 68 years. That's right, 68 years behind bars. His youth was spent within the confines of a cell, his adulthood marred by the monotonous routine of prison life. His was a world devoid of freedom, a world where time seemed to stretch endlessly. In stark contrast, there are those who've barely had time to feel the chill of their cell before they're released back into the world. Take the case of a man whose name has been lost to history, who holds the record for the shortest ever prison sentence. He was behind bars for a mere minute. Yes, you heard that right, just 60 seconds. He was in and out before the prison doors had even had a chance to close behind him. Or consider the case of Joe Arity, a man with an IQ of 46, wrongfully convicted and sentenced to death. He spent a little over 6 years on death row before being posthumously pardoned nearly 60 years later. His time in prison, though short in comparison to Geidel's, was marked by a different kind of torment, the impending doom of an undeserved death sentence. You see, time in prison isn't just measured in years, months, or minutes, it's measured in lost opportunities, in dreams deferred, in the transformation of a person's very being. From the longest of sentences, where time seems to stretch into infinity, to the shortest, where freedom is regained in the blink of an eye, these stories serve as a stark reminder of the complexities of our justice system. They remind us that behind each sentence, no matter how long or short, there lies a unique human story, a story of resilience, of regret, of redemption. Whether long or short, each sentence carries its own story. Prisons, in their many forms, reflect our views on crime and punishment. As we've journeyed through this discussion, we've highlighted the stark disparities in conditions and sentences in prisons around the world. From the harsh, unforgiving corners of the globe where survival is a daily struggle, to the more humane rehabilitation-focused establishments that seem more like a resort than a prison, the range is vast and varied. Let's pause for a moment and recap. We've seen the unseen horrors that exist behind walls and bars, places where rights are stripped bare and the human spirit is tested to its limits. We've delved into the harshest conditions where even the smallest comforts are a luxury, where the environment itself is a punishment. On the flip side, we've also explored the other side of the coin, prisons that focus on rehabilitation over punishment, where inmates are given a chance to learn, grow, and prepare for a life beyond the prison walls. Places where the focus is on the person, not the crime. We've learned about the longest and shortest sentences served, from a man who spent 70 long years behind bars, to a criminal who was in prison for just a fleeting minute. These stories, though extreme, serve to remind us of the wide-ranging and complex nature of crime and punishment. This brings us to the ongoing debate about the purpose of prisons. Should they be places of punishment designed to deter potential criminals and make those inside pay for their crimes? Or should they focus more on rehabilitation, preparing inmates for a successful re-entry into society? It's a conversation that challenges our views on justice, retribution, and redemption. Remember, these are extreme examples on both ends of the spectrum. Most prisons and prisoners' experiences fall somewhere in between. As we continue to grapple with these issues, let's not forget the human element at the heart of it all.